All right. So, welcome everyone as we are
Mhm.
going to enter the entertainment studios of SeptumSin versus the world as we discuss the variety of things going on in movie land and maybe even a bookshelf or movie shelf near you with the
Maybe.
Vlogcast. So, actually, I invited my wife on tonight to discuss because she had just finished watching Justice League, so she wanted to talk a little bit on
Ah,
that. So I'm gonna give the mic over to her.
Howdy,
Justice League,
howdy.
Justice League, the studio mandated cut.
No, I mean, I've seen it a million times, and I decided to rewatch it again. Just to for nostalgia's sake. And then when I got the news last week that the Snyder Cut was a thing, I was so freaking excited. Now here's the thing: I am not a huge Snyder fan, but knowing the backstory of what the studio and Joss Whedon did to Justice League, it pissed me off. Like, can I cuss on this? It
Yeah.
pissed me
Yeah.
off. Because Snyder had a vision. He had the character Cyborg. They screwed him over in the studio version of Justice League. And then Joss Whedon, he added all that bullshit humor to it, like with Flash falling into Wonder Woman's tits. I mean, it was like fucking Avengers. He tried to make it into Avengers. And I get that people don't like the whole dark.
that's what they were going for.
Yeah, exactly. I get that people don't like the whole dark and brooding Superman and Batman and all that stuff, but hey, it worked for Christopher Nolan.
Well, yeah, I mean, dark and brooding fits for Batman. I think the issue was they wanted to make that glove fit everyone else.
Well, what pissed? Go ahead.
I was so saying, but think about with Superman, with Man of Steel, at least, because I'm a big Henry Cavill fan, not gonna lie. With Man of Steel, that kind of worked. The dark and brooding, the idea that you've got these powers that you don't know what to do with, you don't understand. You're the last person, or so you thought, of your kind. Yeah, yeah, I'd be a little dark and brooding too. But
think about this. Like he's like you said, this is him trying to get his bearings on this new world, still trying to find his place in the world. Plus, once he gets his costume and once the other Kryptonians arrive and start causing havoc, it's like, people were really hard on him for all the damage he caused, but I'm like, guys, it's his first day on the job, cut him a little bit of slack. I mean, come on,
save the world.
Yeah, I mean, come on, he's not exactly a seasoned veteran at this whole superhero thing. It's like,
right.
And besides, it's like, can't you expect a little collateral damage? Like most of the criticisms people have of Man of Steel, I think, are bullshit. Most of them are, but one thing I will say, supporting what you had said about Justice League, once we see, like, I was on board for Dark Superman and for like the 3-film arc of him trying to figure out, like, what's my place in this world? Am I meant to be the savior of the world? Am I meant to what am I meant to do? Because that's what Batman v Superman was asking. So then by the time we get to Justice League, that should be the time when he's able to, and you see some of this, but it's not done all that well, but you see some of what was, he's meant to kind of see like the dark Superman suit and be able to reject that and say, I'm not going to be a conqueror, I'm going to be more than that. And you see some nuggets of that, but honestly, the way that it comes across in the theatrical studio mandated cut, it comes across like it's like the exact opposite message that you're supposed to send with Superman, which is that they only they resurrect him because they can't Steppenwolf on their own, and they basically, in other words, they need Superman not because of who he is or what he represents, but because he is powerful. That's like the only reason why they resurrect him, and because Batman feels guilty. But it's like, come on, guys, you shot yourself in the foot, and because and again, you could make the whole his whole intended arc, he was going in that direction, you could easily make that work, but like just the way it was done, it was like, man, the only reason why you're resurrecting him is because Batman's got a guilt complex, when I really don't think he should feel very guilty, because I think he was justified in doing what he did, like being antagonistic towards Superman, because he's like, this guy is a ticking time bomb. But like it just seemed like they were trying too hard to try to make it, like you said, like the Avengers with the Joss Whedon rewrites, plus the fact that it was a studio mandated 2-hour running time, which out of all the movies, that's the one that should have been at least 2.5 to 3 hours, because it's it's the big group movie. It's like that of all the movies, that has to be the one that's long. And the studio mandated 2-hour cut. It was like, come on, and
I mean, there were two
plus,
things that kind of pissed me off, though, is that one, the filming was done. But when Zack Snyder left the production temporarily to deal with what happened to his daughter, all the filming was done. They were in post. And then they were like, okay, the studio could have fucking waited for Zack Snyder and his family to grieve and do what they had to do together as a family. Instead, they were like, no. We need this movie out as soon as possible. We need to finish post. They brought in Joss Whedon, and all he was supposed to fucking do was finish the post-production. That's it.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple of brief reshoots, maybe some, ADR and everything like that. But that's all he was supposed to do. Here comes Joss Whedon, and the fucking studio was like, oh, we got the Avengers guy. Okay, so let's take the lightning in the bottle with the first Avengers movie, see if he could turn this, which is what they were going for. Let's be real. They wanted their Avengers. Yeah.
And they tried so hard.
That's why they friggin' fast tracked that one in the first place. I mean, you had Man of Steel, standalone movie.
Yeah.
And that was it. Basically, Batman v Superman. You have the sequel to Man of Steel, but guess what? We're going to bring in Batman and Wonder Woman. Suicide Squad, wait, we get to introduce a whole bunch of people all at once.
Yeah.
And then Justice League. They were not being patient at all.
No, because it's the Marvel Cinematic Universe had over a decade to cultivate that entire universe. They want to do all this shit in a couple of years with DC. But like I said, Joss Whedon, all he was supposed to do was finish the post-production, and that's it. They went in and we shot a bunch of shit against Zack Snyder's vision, and then cut a lot of stuff out that would have given Cyborg, who was supposed to be the heart of this movie. Instead, they spent half the movie trying to convince him to join the team, and the rest of the time he's just doing a bunch of fucking one-liners. Booyah! Like, what the hell is this racist shit?
Yeah, well, I mean, he wasn't even. I mean, like, at least in Teen Titans, the show, like, he had personality, and he had that. There was a lot of heart from him in that show. So it's like, if you wanted to do that and make him relatable or whatever, you could do it. Just look at the show as a template. But I mean, I
could and should have used, but
absolutely. Well, I mean, for me, like you said with the Joss Whedon thing, like, I like Joss Whedon quite a lot, but like, and I don't even know if this was necessarily his fault or if he was just doing what the studio wanted, but like, it was more so like, I mean, it's so clear that they wanted to replicate Avengers. Like, that's pretty obvious. But for me, what sucks more, in the vein of what you said, is that in their press release, Warner Brothers said, and Joss Whedon himself was saying that in the past that he had been brought on to kind of mold his distinctive style, which, his style is really distinct, but they said that he could mold his style to fit what the other author or the other director had done. And you could not have put together two more polar opposite filmmakers and expect them to somehow work together, like their styles to work. Because Zack Snyder, like him or not, like his movies or not, is one of the most gifted visual directors working today, and he can convey so much information in the course of a single shot without needing dialogue. And it's like that's what filmmaking is at its core. It's a story told with pictures, and he's a genius at doing that thing. Joss Whedon's a genius in terms of dialogue and meta humor and script structure and characterization and all that stuff. like he's really good at that, but his visual sense is pretty piss poor. And so any kind of good shots that you get, you're almost certain that it was at the suggestion of the DP. But it's like you cannot meld these two people together and expect them to jive.
I wouldn't say he's terrible at the visual sense, but I would say he's not particularly. He doesn't stand out. One thing I will give Snyder is his eye. I feel like most of his films, to me, they're a little cold. They're a little, for lack of a better way of saying it, they're a little soulless. I actually think Man of Steel probably has the most heart of any film I've seen from Zack Snyder. But visually, they're stunning films.
Oh yeah.
Snyder, again, I'm not a huge Zack Snyder fan, but as far as like I said, visually, his films are beautiful. I mean, stylistically, look at 300. That's stylistically a very nice, lovely film to look at.
All style. That's all it was.
Yeah, but that's the problem with a lot of his stuff is that he's all style and not a lot of substance.
Right.
It really depends on who's writing the script because, kind of similar to Michael Bay in that sense because they both come from the world of commercials and music videos, and in that world you have to think visually, you have to be able to sell the product quickly or create captivating sequences that go along with the music or the central visual theme or whatever. So you have to approach their movies with that mindset. But the thing is, like with both of them, and especially with Zack Snyder, like whoever's writing the script, like with his version of Dawn of the Dead, like that was James Gunn doing that script, and it's a really good solid. It's a really good. It's a really good solid script. It's got good characterizations, good tension, all that stuff. And then like even with something like Watchmen, which I think he was. I know it was David Hayter who was one of the writers. I think Zack Snyder might have contributed a bit himself, but even then, like most of the dialogue in that film is lifted word for word from what Alan Moore wrote, and even though Alan Moore was not crazy about his films being adapted, it's but at the same time, it's like if you're gonna adapt something that's that good, it's like why reinvent the wheel, and so. Most of it was lifted word for word, and it's like, well, okay, then you can just let the brilliance shine through. So like, if he's in the hands of a good screenwriter, him and Michael Bay both, then then they can make something that's good. Because I don't necessarily think it's a tough thing because you have to like either be a really accomplished screenwriter yourself, which Zack Snyder has. He does have some screenplay credits, but like, and Michael Bay has no screenplay or story credits of any kind. So like, you either have to be a director who, despite not really being known as a writer, you have to at least be familiar enough to know what you want. Like, Steven Spielberg does not have very many writing credits to his name because that's really not what he does primarily, but he does have a good understanding of story. And Mel Gibson, like he has screenwriting credits as well, but people typically don't think of him as a screenwriter, even though I'd say he's more of a screenwriter than even Spielberg. But the point is, even if that's not your primary focus, you can still have a good good emphasis on story and everything. If you're coming from that world of commercials and music videos, then more often than not, that's your mindset. And so if you're in the good hands of a good screenwriter who knows what he or she's doing, then, you'll get a good movie.
The question is this: what are we all hoping to see with the Snyder Cut? Like, I know what I'm hoping to see.
I know what I'm hoping to see too. I want to see, the darker tone, but also I want to see more just cohesiveness. I want to see more threads that were set up in the previous films. I want to see those come to fruition. And like, I want to see the black suit Superman scene that we've seen screenshots of. I want to see just more in the way. I want it to actually feel like a Zack Snyder film, like for better or worse, for richer or poorer, whatever. Like something like Batman v Superman. Like it did feel like his vision, his his realization of this thing, and like some of my favorite moments in that film are some of those more like those sequences, and like a lot of it is a lot of story is told via montage, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but like a lot of visual information. Yeah, well, a lot of stuff is communicated in just images of like him coming down from Superman coming down from the sky to rescue someone, or him being in the El Dia de los Muertos, celebration, and just those kinds of images, they really stick with you. And honestly, I felt like that film was to me, it was a Batman movie first and foremost. And as a Batman film, I thought, well, this kind of got that dark tone down. It got the more of the stylization aspect of Batman. Like it wasn't ashamed of, unlike the Christopher Nolan films, it wasn't ashamed of the fact that it took place in a comic book world. And yet, it got the essential characterizations, I think, of Batman down. And Superman's just mostly there as this more so of just a looming possible threat that, people have to figure out, well, what do we do with this thing, this entity? And so, I mean, that's, and I think that is something that if I could go back with that film, it'd be streamline it severely and don't put in Doomsday, put in some other generic monster, and put more of it. Well, yeah, and then also just put more of a give Superman more to do, because the plot is more kind of built around him rather than him being like a central agent in the thing. And that's why I say it's more of a Batman movie. But as a Batman movie, I thought it was actually pretty good. I do think it had a little too much stuff in it.
Actually, you're ignoring the crazy-haired elephant in the room.
Yeah.
They went entirely the wrong direction with Lex.
Actually, I had a point on that.
That's too bad though, because like Jesse Eisenberg, like I remembered when he was cast, like I wanted Bryan Cranston because I heard
that would have been great.
Well, I heard rumors that either him or Terry O'Quinn from Lost. I had heard that they were being that they were in discussions.
Terry O'Quinn would have been awesome.
He really would, and Bryan Cranston both, they would have been great. But like I wanted either one of them. Now that's not to say like when Jesse Eisenberg was cast, I thought, oh, okay, well, if he just does exactly what he did in The Social Network, then we're good, because like that. Did. Well, not really. He was much more manic and much more like. Well, but he was much more obviously psychotic and much more clearly unstable. But he was not like the cold, calculating genius of his version of Mark Zuckerberg. Like, seriously, if you could have plopped that character into that movie, it would have been perfect. Now,
I mean, the character, the performance was all over the place. Like it was spastic. It was really weird.
I enjoyed his performance. I was just like, this is not Lex Luthor. Not at all.
Well,
no.
Like,
I'm okay. Like if they wanted to do like a younger, like kind of like I said, like young tech kind of version of the character, you've got Jesse Eisenberg did such a good job in The Social Network. Seriously, just say do what you did, just do that again. You got it. Now, if I had to guess, I imagine probably why they wanted somebody that was a bit more. I guess lively is a polite way to say it. Like so, in other words, someone that's not so dour, because everybody else was playing it pretty dour. Yeah. I think they did need somebody like that to be different from everyone else, which is fine. But Lex Luthor is not the one to do it. Do the Riddler, do something like that. Somebody.
I was going to say Eisenberg's portrayal could have worked for the Riddler.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
Would have been very interesting.
You see, my vision of that is very different when it comes to the Batman v Superman experience. I think first off, with Batman v Superman, you need to get rid of Batman. And hold on, give me a hear me out here. On why I say this. all of the traits that they attributed to Batman hating Superman,
Yeah.
Batman could have easily been replaced by Lex Luthor in
Yeah.
that, because all of the things that Batman was looking at, all the grievances, that was the background that Lex Luthor had. What they should have done, and this is one of the things I do feel one of the major weaknesses of the DCU at the beginning, and one that's showing a strength now, is that with the Marvel Universe, a lot of different directors took the helm. What they should have done is, instead of saying, okay, Zack Snyder needs to cover every movie, it should be, go ahead and have Ben Affleck do his own Batman movie to start. He had some amazing stuff that he had on tap. I think that his movie would have been great. Deathstroke was going to be in it. It was going to be an awesome movie, and Batfleck was much better than what I had thought. And then
he was great as Batman. Like he looked the part, and also people hated on Ben Affleck for so long for bullshit reasons. But one of the
that's why they hated him.
Well, but like I've seen the director's cut of Daredevil. I haven't seen the theatrical cut, but the director's cut's good. But the thing is, with him as an actor, like I always saw him, even from his earliest films, I always saw him as the strong, silent type, and not really as an overly emotional person. And you can do that well in movies, and in fact, underplay tends to play better than going over the top. It depends on the movie, of course, but like that with Gone Girl, like he played I guess he technically wasn't a sociopath, but he was pretty darn close. I mean, he had all of the he had all the necessary ingredients as far as like just being totally emotionally out of step with most people, to where he's a pretty strong suspect in his wife's murder.
Of course, in that one, he was privy to information no one else was until later, and that helped explain a lot of his actions.
Like, I was one of those people that when they announced the casting of Ben Affleck, I went back through my old blog, and I had done an entry in my blog on it. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, no to Batfleck. Am I the only one who remembers Daredevil? And then I saw Batman vs. Superman. And I was like, okay. So I was like, okay, all right. Now, Batman vs. Superman, yes, that movie was all over the place. I did finally watch the director's cut, the extended cut of that. And the extended cut is better than the theatrical cut. But I was very satisfied by Ben Affleck's portrayal of Batman and Bruce Wayne. Because he did something different from the Christopher Nolan Batman. He's now... Bruce Wayne is much older now. He's kind of like, okay, I've been doing this shit for 20 years. I'm too old for this shit.
He's very disillusioned, and I love certain things that they did right. So see, like, okay, the Christopher Nolan films, like, they're good for what they are, but like one of my big beefs with them as a comic book person is that they seemed rather like ashamed of the fact that they took place, like that the films were about a comic book character, and like it or not, you're having to deal with a comic book world. And they tried so hard to make it as realistic as they could, while still, hitting all the major beats. And it's like, but it was like, to a certain extent, it's like, guys,
I'm not sure I felt that they were at all ashamed of it. If anything, there were a lot of nods to comic books.
Well, I guess what I mean is more so like being okay with, like, you would never see any other supernatural kind of character. You would never see that in his universe. You would never see Superman in that world. You would never see anything that wasn't, it marketed itself as the realistic Batman. And it was more so like, for me, it was like, okay, fine. But it's like, there comes a point where you have to acknowledge that, okay, this is stretching plausibility. But and as opposed to, say, something like Joker, which was probably the most realistic comic book movie I've ever seen, because it was so unbelievably real, in terms of its focus. But like anyway, with Batman v Superman, it was like, okay, we finally got a world where you can have Batman and Superman and Aquaman and Wonder Woman and all these different kinds of things coexisting. And you also have a bat suit that, and I love the all black bat suit, especially Michael Keaton's. Like, I like that more even than the classic look in the comics, but they managed to make the classic look in the comics. They managed to make that work. The Batmobile was not a tank; it was a car. I mean, it was obviously heavily reinforced, but it was like, good. The Batmobile is actually a car again. Thank you. You had stuff that I don't know. It felt more like comic book Batman being on the screen, plus just a world in which these different kind of out of the blue concepts could coexist. Whereas again, with the Christopher Nolan films, like they tried to do everything they could to make these otherwise out there concepts somehow work in a somewhat realistic context. And it's like, at a certain point, it's like you're kind of, you have to, at some point you have to acknowledge, okay, that it's a comic book movie. That doesn't mean take it less seriously. It's just
I think one of the cool things about the Batman series is, and let me preface this by saying two of my favorite characters in all of the DCEU, probably my favorite two, are technically metahumans. But most of the Batman comics can exist in that world where you don't have to acknowledge metas and all that kind of stuff. Batman himself is deeply skeptical of them. He does not care for them. He does not trust them. But every now and then you'll see him put in a position where he actively seeks out the ones that are more trustworthy for one reason or another. But within the Batverse, if you will, you mentioned Harley is technically a meta. She has been genetically enhanced by her BFF Poison Ivy, and also technically by Joker dropping her in that vat of chemicals.
If you're going by that more New 52 continuity where that happens, because classic Harley Quinn, she's just wearing makeup.
Exactly.
Because
I feel like in Rebirth, she still has the super strength and immunity to toxins, doesn't she?
I don't know. I mean, I imagine. I think I know for a fact the immunity to toxins, that was something that was given to her by
Ivy. And Ivy is one of the few true metas in the Batman universe, and that varies on the telling too.
Yeah,
in the animated series, she starts off perfectly normal, just a chemist. So it depends, and of course you got Mr. Freeze has got some, but that was the result of an experiment gone wrong. So there's like a few of these. You can do the Batverse with relatively little reliance on that kind of thing, and it doesn't seem too out of step. Now, if you were trying to do a Superman or a Supergirl or something like that and say, come up with some scientific explanation for it all, that just doesn't quite work.
Actually, I wanted to ask because Dave hasn't had a chance to really get into this. Hey, Dave, what are your thoughts on the whole Snyder Cut and DCU situation?
Now, when is the Snyder Cut supposed to come out? I know I heard inklings of when it might come out. Does anyone know?
Sometime in 2021. So within the next year, definitely.
Okay.
They gave Zack Snyder an extra $20 to $30 million to go back and do some reshoots, and to work on the effects, because his cut, the effects weren't finished. So you're gonna go back through and just start redoing some stuff. And he's got a year to make that happen. So
plus, they're going to want to put that back out in theaters, and they'll probably want it.
No, it's gonna be on HBO Max.
At least they've given him the option of doing so. I mean, that is something that not many people get a chance to do, which is go back and revision what you want to create. And I think it's because of fandom that has brought that Snyder cut to a possibility of happening. So,
and I'm glad. Here's the thing: like, fandom is a fickle thing, and it's something that. When it goes bad, like in the case of Ghostbusters or The Last Jedi or something like that, when it goes bad, it goes like really bad, and
Yeah.
you're like, what happened? You know, like especially with Star Wars, because you're like, Star Wars is all about diversity and acceptance triumphing over conformity and oppression and all that stuff. Like that is the story, and yet you are harassing the actor who played Rose, you know, that, and bitching and moaning about this and that, which it just didn't make any sense to me. But then when the fan base does rally around something that makes some kind of logical sense, like for example, not just the Snyder Cut, but like getting Sonic the Hedgehog to actually look like Sonic the Hedgehog, which I completely sympathize with the fans on that one. And I'm not even like one of the mega Sonic fans, because let's just say that they can be rather questionable. And that's all we need to say about that. But the you know, I was completely on their side on that one, because like whatever they did that first time around, like that was like an abomination to look at. You know, it was horrifying to look at. And so thankfully they listened to the fans, they went back, they made Sonic look like Sonic, and they didn't suffer catastrophic losses, because, you know, well, and see now, and I say that as a positive, because it wasn't always like that. What it used to be, like in the early 2010s, with like late 2000s, early 2010s, when you had so much of the internet bitching and moaning about, like, say, Michael Bay's Transformers, or, you know, which he didn't, and he didn't even direct the TMNT reboot.
No.
Like he just produced it, but like, yeah, but things like that, things that, like, you know, that a good portion of the fan base, that they're not going to like this thing, and yet they would still go see it, and then they would bitch and moan about it. It's like, well, if you don't like it, don't see it. And that's why, like, when James Rolfe, when he made his video about, you know, why he won't see Ghostbusters 2016, like, he got, you know, raked over the coals for it, even though he didn't mention, you know, the fact that it starred women at all. Like, it was, and he didn't even like dance around the issue. It just said it looks like it's not going to be funny, and he was like, guess what? I'm not going to see it. And it was like, oh, gee whiz, we had to wait this long for this one person to actually do what you're supposed to do when you don't want to see something, is you vote with your dollar or your lack thereof. And you know, so in the olden days, like roughly 5 to 10 years ago, you know, like in those times, but you know what I mean? It's like, in those times, it's like, if you really feel that way about the movie, then don't give the studios your money, and they won't make more of it. You know, it's like,
Well,
it's
they
that
might
simple.
still make
It's
more of it.
well, but it's
other
like,
people will.
well, but that's what I mean. It's like, if you're in the vocal minority or whatever, then
Right.
okay, fine. But if most people are okay with it, you know, like the Last Jedi, then, you know, fine. But it's like, the thing is, like, people just forget that, okay, you can bitch and moan all you want, but at the end of the day, you need to vote with your dollar, because that's what money talks and bullshit walks, you know? And it's like, you know, and I think the fan bases have caught up to that, because of, like, you know, Ghostbusters having not done well at the box office, because they got Sonic redesigned so that way they didn't suffer catastrophic losses. It's like, I think that the fans are getting it now, and I think studios are listening, which, and again, I'm not for mob rule, but at the same time, I am for people voting with their dollar, because in the free market, that is how you decide if you want something or you don't want more of that thing.
I think a lot of the fans, though, who got excited about the Snyder Cut, who were all hashtag release the Snyder Cut, those people were the ones who, I wouldn't call them necessarily true fans, but they saw the Justice League movie. They were disappointed because we all saw those early trailers, and we saw footage in those early trailers that did not end up in the daggone final cut of the movie. And so a lot of people were confused, like, hold on, so what happened to Cyborg's backstory? Where's the more information on Barry Allen and stuff? So a lot of people were kind of confused. That's why so many fans for so long, we all want to see the Snyder Cut, because we're like, okay, maybe he had a different idea than what shit show we ultimately got.
Yeah. Well, and see, like, and that one's not even all that unreasonable of a request, because most of it is shot already, and what would need to be done with it is not anywhere close to what it would cost to make, make the movie over again.
A whole new film.
Well, and especially because Justice League is one of the most expensive movies ever made, so there's no way they would do that. But like in that instance, I was like, well, that's not, and like I could just get more mad when it is something that doesn't make logical sense, is unreasonable or unrealistic, or or is just bitching and moaning because it's not like what they grew up with. In that specific instance, like, I think that makes sense. It's not that much of an imposition to get another cutout, because generally speaking, with Zack Snyder's films, like, his director's cuts tend to be a lot better, because he's a director who does need to have time to convey an idea fully, and to, that's part of why people tend to not like a lot of his films in the theater, because like he tends to do what you need to do with a lot of movies, is it's okay to have mood time, it's okay to fully develop an idea, and when that doesn't happen, then it truncates it, and then people are like, oh, it feels cold, it feels lifeless, it feels whatever, because some people, they just need to develop their idea. It's like S. Craig Zahler, like, part of why he's gotten a lot of scripts sold, but so few of them produced, and only because he had to drive the whole train, because part of it is because, well, he makes very often brutal films, but also because he doesn't want to truncate the length, because he believes in mood time, and believes in just letting things play out, and not being allowing the films to be dictated by committee, which obviously in the case of something as big as Justice League with so much money on the line, you kind of have to do that to a certain extent. And that's something that the fans don't necessarily understand, is just how much of those ginormously budgeted films are made by committee. But you also understand.
I have a question for you guys, because I feel like we're getting off track. We're talking about the Phantom and everything like that. Do you think that this Snyder Cut will finally put all those debates to rest? Because for years we were told there is no Snyder Cut, it doesn't exist, it'll never happen. But you have the fans that wanted the Snyder Cut, and you had other fans that are like, shut the hell up and move on. Get over it, it'll never happen. Justice League was a shit show. So do you think that now that we have the Snyder Cut that's coming a year from now, do you think we'll be talking about how it's now finally settled the debates over it, and that people will finally be able to move the hell on? Or do you think it will just open up some more debates about, well, the studio should have done this?
Well,
people will bitch and moan about anything.
Yeah. True, yeah.
They will bitch and moan about anything.
I don't think we'll ever close the book on what the studio should have done. Right. Like we were talking earlier about, like, Joss Whedon. I loved Joss Whedon as a director. He was a poor choice for this. I mean, it would have made so much sense. They probably tried and couldn't get Christopher Nolan to come in and do it. But aside from him, Michael Mann might have been a good choice. I mean, he probably would have been a very good.
Actually, Tim Burton.
Tim Burton would have been.
He's quirky. He's too quirky.
I don't know. Tim Burton is all the visual and a lot less of the heart. He's very similar to Zack Snyder in those.
Yes, but he is very quirky.
Well, I know who should have done it, if not Zack Snyder, or I know exactly who should have done it. So in around 2000 and it was like between 2004 and 2007, something like that. But it was, for a time, there was serious talks of George Miller of Mad Max fame doing Justice League, doing a movie called Justice League Mortal. And keep in mind, he had just come off of Mad Max Fury Road, which is a very visually rich, action-packed, exciting time. And he would have been a great choice, because he was, again, that was a Warner Brothers movie.
I think that was prior to Fury Road.
What? His Justice League Mortal? Yeah, it was in development before that. But I mean, like, the timelines would have added up for, like,
for the new one.
Yeah, for 2015, 2017. You know, maybe, who knows? Maybe they did talk to him and they couldn't get him. I don't know. But like stylistically, that actually would have been a good fit.
That would have been.
Yeah, and I would have liked to have seen. Go ahead.
I said, or the studio could just waited for the man to fucking grieve the death of his daughter.
That's true.
Well, and that's.
But I know I'm asking too much for studio executives to not be assholes.
Yeah. Well, considering the, you would hope. You would hope.
Yeah,
but then we also hope
that, like. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, we also hoped after the debacle that was Suicide Squad that maybe Warner's would have figured out that maybe we should give our filmmakers a little bit more room to do what they want to do. And maybe we should listen a little more to what the fans want. And maybe we should invest in a good screenplay.
But you know what's sad, though, with Suicide Squad? Because, like, wasn't it for my birthday that, like, me, you, Jay, like, me, you, Brandon, and a bunch of our friends, we went and saw Suicide Squad for my birthday. Now, here's the thing. I did not mind the casting of Will Smith, Margot Robbie. I actually liked them. I didn't mind some of the other characters that they did for the film, some of the other actors in it. I did not like Jared Leto's, solo version of freaking Joker. That was a little weird.
That was very weird.
Well, honestly, I defend his Joker all the time because of the fact that so much of what he did and all of the painstaking work that he put into it, so much of it got left on the cutting room floor, and so we wouldn't have. I am sure if we'd have seen the whole thing, and if we'd have seen the non-reshot versions of scenes, like, I am sure that we would have seen a truly unsettling Joker. Because, like, I think talent-wise, he's definitely got the chops for it.
I can back that up a little bit because last night I finally watched Fury, which was basically the movie that got David Ayer the job. And that was a deeply unsettling movie in a lot of ways. So I think they probably would have gone in very dark places if the studio hadn't interfered.
Well, here's the thing with Jared Leto's performance of Joker. I feel like him and the relationship between him and Harley Quinn. Even though I didn't really like him as Joker, when the two of them are together, I'm like, it freaking works because they're both that shit insane.
Yes, exactly.
They make a kind of cutely psychotic couple.
I actually think that Joker was the logical next step thematically from the Dark Knight's Joker. That was the direction it was going in, and it was, to me, it was a natural next step. So I really don't think that looking at his Joker, especially when you didn't really get a full shot of him, you only got to see a glimpse of him, really was not fair. In many cases, if Jared Leto's Joker was only given like a minor amount of screen time, and even today, I really don't like that version of Joker, but that's not. But I understand why people like.
Well, he might have. Well, he might have gotten a chance to win you over if he'd have had time to do so. But one other reason why I do defend his Joker, not just because of I think he got severely screwed over, but part of it also was just on a characterization level. I was really glad, speaking of comic book world and everything, I was really glad that we finally got back to someone who fell into a vat of acid and actually had bleached skin. As opposed to wearing makeup, because when I first saw The Dark Knight, like I got over it relatively quickly, but when I first saw it, I was kind of miffed that it was makeup and not that, but but again, like it was done well in The Dark Knight, done possibly better in Joker, because obviously it's a character study, but so that interpretation, the makeup version can work, but like the Joker in my head is somebody who is physically deformed, by this accident, and someone who, his brain is all screwed up and everything. So, I mean, and we hadn't seen that on the big screen since Jack Nicholson, who, looked the part. He, had the proper origin. He had the proper personality and everything. It's like, that's pretty close to comic book Joker, and so I was glad that we were at least getting back in that direction.
Well, the thing with the Joker, and this is one of the things I always loved about Dark Knight, is there is no the proper origin. Like one of my favorite lines in any comic ever was in The Killing Joke, where the Joker says, "If I had to have a pass, I'd prefer it to be multiple choice."
Yeah.
And I loved how in The Dark Knight he keeps explaining the Glasgow Smile with a different story every time. And that was a great way of making a nod to that. But I will admit, in Suicide Squad, the makeup of the basic bleaching in the hair was phenomenal. But all that other stuff was just stupid. There was too much. It was too much. All the letters and writing and all the extra tattoos and they look like prison tats all over him. The grill, that was too much. Like they did everything right and then went too far. And that was. But again,
I have to say they were basing it off of that one look of his in the comics that looks like that. I mean, I prefer Joker to not, and Harley. I prefer them to not have tattoos, but that's just me. I mean, not to say you can't make that work.
Like I like the diamond on the wrist, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
but
I like the lucky you on the midriff there, and I liked I mean, there were definitely good things there, and honestly, people were like, "Why did it win best makeup and hairstyling?" Well, I know exactly why, because think about it. You had to create layers of makeup for her and for Jared Leto that looked like bleached skin and not like makeup. You had to make sure
makeup. There was
Diablo had great. He did, and you have to make sure that all of that can hold up in the rain, because remember, there's a lot of rain in the thing, and conventional makeup will wash right the hell off, and you have to maintain the hair, the consistency of the makeup. I can totally see why it won, and because of like Killer Croc and everything, like they look great. And and again, it's like the Star Trek Beyond makeup, like that looked really good too, but like I'm just saying, like when they got exposed to the elements as frequently as they did in that film, it's like, well, that requires a different caliber of makeup artists to make sure that your materials don't just completely disintegrate, and so I mean, I defend that too, because people like to bitch about that.
Okay, so a question, guys. So what do y'all think about the what they're saying now that there's going to be a Snyder cut?
They're talking about the air cut. Yeah.
I would love to see that.
Well, that too, yeah, because everyone's talking about the air cut. But now there's talks that Man of Steel 2 might be back on the table. They said that Henry Cavill and Zack Snyder have now buried the hatchet, and now maybe they're going to get back together for a Man of Steel 2. Because I remember reading last summer to hear that him and Christopher McQuarrie were trying to basically take Man of Steel away from Snyder. They went and pitched an idea for another Superman movie to the studio, and the studio was like, "Yeah, no, that and a Green Lantern movie." And that the rumor I heard was that he kind of hurt Zack Snyder's feelings with that, because it's like, how the hell are you going to sit there, the man who gave you the role of Superman, you're going to walk away from him and then team up with a Mission Impossible director and be like, "Hey, we're going to go pitch a Superman film to the studio." The studio, by the way, has a contract with Snyder, and they're like, "Yeah, we're not doing that."
Now, I'll admit, McQuarrie could have been a good fit, but those circumstances, no, that's not a good.
That was really shitty of him to do that. I thought, it's like, well, damn. But now they said him and Snyder have buried the hatchet. He was on Snyder's live stream last week when they announced the Snyder cut, and the talk is that Henry Cavill will do anything to keep that role.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's something that he said actually. Even before that, like relatively recently before that, he said that he was still under contract to play Superman, and he really did want to. Like the fact that he was hanging up the cape because he didn't like it or whatever, he said that wasn't true. And I thought he was a great Superman for what they were going for. Like he wasn't Christopher Reeve, and he shouldn't have been Christopher Reeve, because that was what brought down Brandon Routh, because he did a good job of being Christopher Reeve without being Christopher Reeve. But you know, but again, it's like that movie, like it was too. Superman Returns was too undecided about what it wanted to be. But like I thought that he was good as like a darker, more conflicted, more uncertain of his role in life, that kind of Superman. But the actually, and again, I'll defend. I defend Zack Snyder all the time. One of the big points that I do defend him on also is not just what you said about like he gave him the role, which he did, but also let's not forget we all love Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman.
Yes.
Guess who cast her? It was, you know, in his film Batman v Superman. So he obviously saw something in her that most people didn't see. And again, the fan base, they bitched and moaned at when she first got cast, and then nowadays it's like, well, who else could you imagine playing her, because she was so
the
good.
Reason why they complained so much is they felt that she was too small. The fans wanted Gina Carano as Wonder Woman.
The other casting, the rather unconventional casting that Snyder did with that film that I liked. I really enjoy Jeremy Irons as Alfred. I think he's a very fun.
I'm so gonna miss him in the next Batman movie.
No, that's it.
I said I'm gonna miss him in the next Batman movie. The Robert Pattinson movie. They recast the role.
They recast everyone. They had friggin' J.K. Simmons as Gordon, and now it was Jeffrey Wright, I think, is playing Gordon.
Yeah,
which is a very different characterization. Simmons was a good choice, but he didn't get to do anything in the role.
Yeah, he got like one scene, which
basically,
I was like, what the hell? Yeah.
I
mean, I adore J.K. Simmons as an actor. I thought he's good in like everything I've ever seen him in. And I'm so thankful that even though it's just for that one little scene that they brought him back as J. Jonah Jameson in Spider-Man Far From Home. I was like, yes. Well, and I loved that again because the power of newspapers is nowhere near what it once was. I was really glad that they made him basically Alex Jones because he probably would do that. And I mean, and Alex Jones, like we laugh at him for good reason because he's batshit insane. But you know, he does command a media empire of his own. It's just not a conventional one, and so therefore, J. Jonah Jameson, being the classic yellow journalist that he is, more than likely probably would be in the, you know, online alternative news sphere. You know, so I was like, that was really smart, you know, and I can't even imagine anybody else playing him because he was just so good. I do think his hair was kind of. I mean, again, they were trying to make him look more like Alex Jones, and they succeeded. I did kind of miss the flat top look, but again, if they did that, then it would be a little too close to the Sam Raimi ones. But still, like I got it immediately once I saw that look, and I was like, oh man, just start talking about gay frogs, please. You know.
Well, as far as like with what we're going to see next year with the cut, you know, now that there's again. Man of Steel 2 is likely back on the table. The rumors are that, you know, we might see a Flash movie. We might finally see a Cyborg movie, you know. And I kind of feel bad for some of the people involved with Justice League because I feel like their careers didn't pan out the way they thought they were. You know, Gal Gadot, she still got her Wonder Woman movie. Jason Momoa, he still got his Aquaman movie. But of all the cast, like I think the one who got screwed over the most is Ray Fisher, who played Victor Stone / Cyborg. Like that dude, I went back after the announcement last week. I went back to IMDb and I was like, you know, what have some of these people been doing? Like, okay, what has Ray Fisher been doing? Oh shit, nothing. He had one role after Justice League, and it was a 9-episode stint on True Detective, which is a great show. Right. But he's not doing anything. He's not acting. You know what he's doing? He's Twitch streaming. He's gaming on fucking Twitch. And I was like, damn, son. Like when the announcement was made, he was crying on his stream because he was happy that the cut was finally going to come out. And he really does truly care about Zack Snyder and his family. That was beautiful to see. But I was like, of everyone involved, this is going to do more for his career than it is anyone else's because he literally doesn't have anything else going on.
Well, don't discount. Like there are a lot of people who can make a really damn good living streaming on Twitch, but I mean
he's an actor, not a fucking Twitch streamer. He's a fucking actor.
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. Is like on his kind of level, yeah, you would expect a lot more. But again, there are people who they can do really damn well on Twitch and on YouTube. They can make a really good living doing that. But for playing on his kind of level, though, yeah, you would expect a lot more.
And he doesn't even have that many followers. Poor guy. But it's like
I know. Well, but he barely got any screen time.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. He hasn't had that many followers on Twitch. But it's sad because it's like Hollywood fucking forgot about him. It's
stupid.
This was supposed to be his big break. He was supposed to be a new star, and instead he did the movie. The movie bombed, and they threw him a bone last year with True Detective, but ever since then, like WB kind of forgot about him. They're like, we'll call you when we need something. We'll call you when we got something right. It's like he's had nothing since then. Ezra Miller, that fucking motherfucker. I feel like they kind of gave him a bit of a bone when he was on the Flash show. Didn't he guest star on the Flash as the Flash?
Yeah, I think he was that multiverse one, Crisis Universe. Yeah.
So he at least got to do something more with his role, but as far as Ray Fisher, he's the only one of the Justice League main cast that has done nothing with the character since then.
I do have one thing to pose, and this is just all on this, and it's been a question that's weighed on my mind for a while, ever since the whole grassroots release the Snyder Cut came. The Snyder Cut probably has some of the highest expectations of any superhero movie out there. So we all talk about everything's going to be great. It's going to be a great success, and this is all that's going to happen after it succeeds. What happens if 2021 comes out and the Justice League ends up being a worse flop than Batman v Superman? Because it is possible. And let's look at some of these characters out. I mean, Wonder Woman and Aquaman, those movies did spectacular, but they were also worlds away from Zack Snyder's visions of those characters.
Well, and they were single character movies, keep in mind. Which now I do want to kind of sort of debunk the it flopped thing, because like it was not a bomb, but it did not do the kind of business that Warner Brothers wanted it to do. So I mean, they kind of lumped it as a flop, but it's like it wasn't a classic, flop in the way that we know it. It was more so that it didn't do the kind of business they were hoping for.
That at the end of the day, that is kind of a flop, because when you stack it up against movies like the Avengers, it's a freaking flop.
Well, comparatively speaking, sure, but I mean,
it did well financially, but it just barely broke even.
Yeah, I mean, sure, you can, yeah, I mean, in relative terms, absolutely. It's just, I just get miffed these days at like it didn't perform at whatever arbitrary benchmark that the studio set for it for its opening weekend, and so therefore it's a flop. It's the sky is falling. Put your head between your knees and kiss your ass goodbye. Like that's the attitude we have these days. It's like films aren't allowed to have word of mouth. Right. They aren't allowed to fester. They aren't allowed to percolate. And that's a larger problem than just superhero movies. But it's like, if you don't make a big splash at opening weekend, you're pretty much out of there. And it's like,
but you're looking at this from an artistic standpoint, and at the end of the day, the Hollywood studio system, it's a business.
Oh, I know.
They're not.
I get it.
Care about the art divisions.
Well, and that's the difference. Is I do get it, and a lot of fans don't get that side of it. It's just that's more of a bemoaning the business model as a whole. But it's one of those things where. Yeah, I think in terms of what kind of business could the Snyder Cut do, well, that depends also on the distribution model, because it's like, well, if you were to do a traditional theatrical release, assuming that we're allowed to still have those, If you were to do that, then you'd have to measure it on those kinds of numbers, or you could do like a Fathom event kind of thing, make it like a few nights and, do it that way. Or in terms of, I think they're wanting it to be an HBO Max thing because they want
It's going to be HBO Max. It's strictly going to be HBO Max.
Yeah.
It's a HBO Max exclusive. It's not going to get released. I mean, they could change their mind between now and a year from now, but from right now, as it is right now, it's going to be strictly on HBO Max, which thankfully we're going to have.
Well, and they're doing that because they want to get those subs up, and I mean that's exactly why I was saying that they need to focus on that and that alone, because then you can measure your success directly from how many new subscribers did you get, how many views did this get, because they're trying to have a product that can compare to what Disney Plus offers, and and again, I've said this before, it's like putting one's focus on streaming and being really aggressive with some kind of really awesome exclusive content on on a high caliber kind of level. And Warner Brothers isn't exactly in deep financial trouble. I mean, HBO, they had obviously humongous success with Game of Thrones, and it's like, well, if you want to push the streaming side of it, not that show specifically, but like if you were to your next big thing that you have on that kind of high caliber level, then just keep it on HBO Max and you'll see those subs go up.
And look at Watchmen. That's a good DC project that's shown like big boom with HBO.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that this whole thing, I believe that there is an expectation that this movie is going to be even bigger than Avengers.
No,
to be.
No.
I mean,
those are way too unrealistic of expectations. I mean, not to say people don't have those expectations, but if they do, then they're fooling themselves. I'm sorry.
Well, the Avengers as a series it has put the Marvel universe on a high caliber pedestal, and it's like all the other films that come after this are like will probably pale in comparison to that buildup that they did. With all of that, which is sad because Black Panther, that was a phenomenal movie.
It was.
Especially for the urban Americans, that are out there. So, I mean,
well, it was part of why it did so well was that it had a strong grassroots support behind it, but also it was a good jumping on point for a lot of people who hadn't been following all of the movies up to that point, which honestly they should have if they're. Yeah, it's like you don't. This is just me, but it's like you got to start at the beginning and not just jump in midway. But a lot of people don't operate that way. So if you were to do so, then that was a good jumping on point. It was a good singular, self-contained movie, even though it obviously connected to all the other ones. And it showed not even African Americans, like actual like Wakandans, showed them being very obviously capable and technologically advanced and and very obviously traditionally African. I can't remember which region it's set in. I can't remember if it's central or western or whatever, but like very obviously not of the West, not trying to be the West. And, that's something that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. And the fact that they did something that was so clearly not so clearly not Western or in the Western mold in terms of how it looked, how that world functioned as a society. Like, that was, I think that was a really smart way to distinguish it and to kind of show what this kind of fully realized place would be like,
Mm-hmm.
The way I look at the DC universe is that it's been very staccato. I mean, when Batman first came out, it came out in 1943. So, and it basically grew from there. And to me, Superman did its own thing. I mean, Max Fleischer came out with their cartoon, and of course, then Batman had their 1960s show.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're also talking about decades of difference, and you're talking about different rights ownership situations, and you're talking about things that were never meant to be interconnected. So, I mean, yeah, if you want to go that far back, then sure. But you could also say that about Marvel. You could say that about Marvel too, because Captain America had a theatrical serial in the 40s, and
Yep.
you know, you could talk about like Howard the Duck in '86. It's like that is a Marvel. That's a Marvel film. You know, it is. There's no way around it.
But what I was trying to lead up to is, I think what I want to say about the DC universe is that Batman specifically was the one that they spent the most time on in animation wise.
Oh yeah.
For sure, and that's why he's survived over time. I think. I mean, I've seen more things in animation wise that have to do with Batman than it has to do with the Superman universe. You know what I mean?
It's like Wolverine when it comes to
part of it is that Batman, he has such a strong rogues gallery. That's part of why it is.
Right.
Well, even Wolverine had some animation series out there.
Yeah.
I think they had the Japanese series along with Wolverine versus whatever, and
that's too bad, really, because the DC universe is quite rich with very unique and amazing characters. And that's one thing I will give the WB series. And I finally caught up with Arrow. I need to catch up with the others. It's just a lot to catch up with. And but they introduced characters like Ragman and and of course the Atom, and just different characters that you don't see traditionally thrown out on screen.
Talking about your Brandon Routh character.
So, you know, to me, I think it's a shame that you only explore. If you look at the DC universe, they go, okay, so we got Batman, we got Superman. Okay, we're done. Which is sad. It's the same thing even with the Marvel universe in some aspects until the Avengers came along, because until the Avengers, the only ones that's like, well, you know, Spider-Man and Wolverine, those are really the only ones that we need to concentrate on because the rest of it's not worth it.
Yeah.
I've never been able to say that I thought that the Avengers would have been a great subject for a movie group, because to me,
I would have, because I grew up reading them. But okay, here's a funny thing looking back on it. So did you guys ever watch on YouTube, Hi, I'm a Marvel and I'm a DC? You know, that whole series? It was parodying the I'm a Mac and I'm a PC commercials. But the very first one that guy did, because it was action figures of Sam Raimi Spider-Man with a Superman, and this was like back in 2006. So they were talking about all of the plans that Marvel had for their movies, and you know how Superman was like just kind of, you know, like, well, we're talking about a movie in the next few years, kind of, sort of, possibly, maybe. And you know, Spider-Man was like, oh yeah, we got Avengers, Ant-Man, all this stuff, and then Superman's like, Ant-Man. But Ant-Man was a damn good movie because Ant-Man's a great character. I always thought Ant-Man was great. And see, like, because I knew, because I read those characters before there were movies made about him. But yeah, I mean, I knew that these could be great movies, and we're all just lucky, and we should be thankful that Iron Man turned out as good as it did, and that. Because Iron Man was not, you know, Iron Man was not like Wolverine, where Wolverine was pretty much always popular from his inception. Iron Man was really kind of a second or third stringer, an important one in the world of the comics, but in terms of like the average Joe, like, you know, people didn't really know much about Iron Man or really care. But then that movie, and actually it's some of those second and third stringers that came along because they didn't have so much hype built around them, that Marvel Studios was able to like really show why they were always great characters. And that's why like Iron Man, Guardians of the Galaxy, Black Panther, Ant-Man, you know, those like second and third stringers, like those have tended to be some of the all-time best Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, because they just got to show, hey, these characters were already great. Here's why. And without all of this, undue hype, because I think part of it is hype can really make or break something, or even like even if it's negativity before something comes out, like people hated the casting of Michael Keaton, and then they saw him and he was great. They hated they hated Heath Ledger's casting, and they saw him and he was great. And just all this stuff that you're just like, guys, use your brains. They hated Gal Gadot's casting, and she was perfect. It's like, come on, guys.
Yeah, it's an interesting way that they've thrown out these universes. I do hope that they delve more into the DC universe. I was glad to see the Shazam movie. I was glad to see an Aquaman movie. A matter of fact, I feel like I saw Aquaman before I saw Justice League, and I felt like, okay, I can see where Zack Snyder had his hand in, because it was so colorful and beautiful in the Aquaman movie, and it was this drab gray ocean for the other. And I was really glad to see what they were going with it, but I'm hoping to see more like that in the future. I think that the biggest loss that the DCU had over all of it was, I think that they should have gone ahead and adapted it into the Arrowverse. I actually think that instead of doing their own movies, if they had used the existing Arrowverse and did movies to connect to those universes with the established characters, one, you'd have an established fan base. Right. And two, you would be able to extend. That's one of the things Stephen King wanted to do with the Dark Tower movie that fell through when the studio said, no, we'll just do it this way. Now he's in talks to try it again, to do a movie with tie-in TV series around it. Yeah. And that, to me, would be the best way to do it. And I think they're starting to do that with the Marvel movies, even though to me it's getting to where it's oversaturated, because to keep up, you got to watch like hundreds and hundreds of hours.
Marvel was always, which I think it's a brilliant way of multi-platform marketing or whatever, but they were always top down with, the movies are up here and then everything else trickles down thereof. But then what you're asking for is more just kind of the opposite direction, which could most definitely work. It's never really been done, but I think it could work theoretically. For me, the big thing that hurt the DCU so much, which again, studio interference tends to do this, but I think it was the number one mistake that they made that I was like, okay, you're killing yourselves right off the bat, which is they jumped the gun. They were trying to introduce way too much, way too quickly. Right. And they did not do what Marvel did, which is give things time to build up, give things time to be properly paced, for the world to be built, for people to get familiar with this world and these characters. So that way, when you get that big team up movie, people care. And, that's why Avengers Endgame was so good, because you had like 10 years or more of legacy built up, and that's why it had resonance, because we had spent so much time with these characters. And one, especially if you're a comic book fan, then you've spent even more time with the characters. But, I think that was the thing. And you notice that the subsequent films after Justice League, that they've tried to make them relatively self-contained, and they've tried to de-emphasize their shared nature, even though, like, for example, James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, which I'm very excited for, that will still have, Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn. And originally he was going to do Idris Elba as Deadshot, but then he cast him as a different character, because that way it would leave the door open for Will Smith to come back if he wanted to, which is fine, because like I think that that was honestly, that was Disney being dumb to fire him from Guardians of the Galaxy 3, only to realize, oh wait, we were dumb, And guess what? And guess what happened? You got swept up by Warner Brothers to do the competing movie, and we shouldn't have been idiots and should understand little things like humor, context, things that we've forgotten in this world. But
Right.
it's but point is, he has very good experience with doing movies about like mismatched misfits on a team, obviously with Guardians of the Galaxy. And I think honestly, if he's given more room to be really kind of raunchy and perverse and with a lot of dark humor, like I know that he tends to like to do, obviously having come off of trauma, then it's like if he can have a wider palette to play with, then I think you'll get that movie that people were wanting the first time around, which again, I didn't mind what I got with Suicide Squad, mostly because of how good Margot Robbie was. But I do think if you had a more cohesive story with obviously less studio interference and more in the way of like dark humor and things like that, then it would have been better. I would have liked to have seen the really dark, brooding Suicide Squad film like the early trailers promised. But still, I'm not a stickler for it must be like the trailer, I'm not a stickler for that. If anything, I want the movie to be different from the trailer because I don't like it when trailers give away too much, because then it makes me not want to see it,
I still say again, the biggest cardinal sin they did a lot of things. The studio mucking with the final cut was a big thing. But the worst sin on Suicide Squad was that the script sucked. They did not have a particularly good story. And they really, like, have you seen Assault on Arkham?
Yes, and people have said, "Oh, that's what it should have been." And I mean, it was a good solid.
Assault on Arkham was a simple, basic, very cohesive story. Very simple, no world-ending sort of stuff, kind of thing. You got Amanda Waller trying to cover her ass by offing a defector from the group. That's pretty much all it was. And it was perfect for Waller. It was perfect for introducing the squad itself. And the baddie they were trying to off was the Riddler, which is a great cameo there. So it's like they had a really good setup. This one, they had some weird mumbo jumbo sort of involving Enchantress. Enchantress is a difficult character under the best of circumstances. They should have saved her for the Justice League Dark movie. And
that would
just
have been cool.
Something else here. And but again, I had no real qualms with the casting. I love Margot Robbie as Harley. Viola Davis was perfect for Waller.
Yeah, but I liked, even though she didn't do as much as I would have liked, I did like Cara Delevingne as the Enchantress.
She was good for the role. It was
but just the stuff around her. Like one thing that I thought was really creepy was when she was in the bathtub with the dark water and the moss and all that stuff around her. Like I was like, oh, that would be great for like a horror movie if you wanted to do like something else. But I think the big thing is I think that what they had could have worked. It was just more so of just needing to maintain the focus a lot more. Because one thing that they did in Assault on Arkham that you couldn't have done, it's obviously easier to do with animation, but one thing that they did is when they had the big Arkham breakout and you saw all the villains and stuff, that was just big, fan service wanking and all that, which again, in animation, like you can do as much of that as you want because it doesn't cost any more to animate this person than it does another person. And you can just, shove shit in the screen if you want. Live action, that would be really just that'd be a little too much, I think. So, I mean, again, you can look at it through that paradigm too. And I mean, the first movie of a team-based group, like a team-based title, the first movie tends to be focused on learn how to get along with each other. And, you did see some of that. I think it was just more convoluted than anything. But you know, I think my big thing with speaking of the Riddler, one of the things that I was most disappointed in with the Christopher Nolan films was that of all the directors to do the Riddler and do him right, Christopher Nolan is the perfect choice, and they didn't do it. And it was like, come on, man. That
and
was
even with all those great fan posters they did for the with NPH as the Riddler, and I would have gone to that.
Well, it's like, come on, this is the guy who loves to be super cerebral, not in any kind of not in any kind of David Lynch sense, but more so in the sense of like, let's make this extremely complicated plot that we have to, like, I'm thinking with Inception, let's make this extremely complicated plot that we have to literally explain to the audience every scene in order for it to make some kind of sense. You know, and it you know, but like, again, he did Inception, he did Memento, he did all of these like really complex, you know, very cerebral plots. It's like, that is perfect for the Riddler, especially if you wanted to do like, I have yet to see like a Anonymous, the hacker group, like that kind of Riddler. That would be awesome. Like if they did that, if they did like him as a hacktivist, or they did like a Jigsaw, you know, type Riddler, you know. There are all kinds of, or some combination thereof. There are all kinds of ways you could do it, and like I would love to see. Honestly, I would love to see the Riddler. This would be like if I could do a Batman film with Riddler as the villain. I would love to do it to where the Riddler is basically like Anonymous, where there are tons of people using the Riddler character as like an avatar to hide behind, and there is like one original one, and that would be Edward Nigma, of course. But you know, for the most part, like the idea would be that they could hide behind any person could take up that challenge, because like you've had real life instances of not only hacktivism but of like codes or puzzles on the internet that have still not been solved to this day, or they were solved and people couldn't, only like a select few did figure it out. Like the cicada 1 whatever that was, I can't remember the name, but it just things like that. It's like, that would be, if you were to do the Riddler today, that would be the perfect avenue for it. And you know, make it like a cyber thriller, make it, you know, make it such that the Riddler can control electronic databases remotely, and can, you know, if he wanted to, you know, he could like basically like make it like Anonymous crossed with the movie Untraceable with Diane Lane, where, you know, it's like integrate some aspects of like Jigsaw and snuff films, and it's like you got it, you know. That'd be awesome.
So time flies when we're having fun, obviously, and we've gone down the rabbit hole of Snyder Cut and DCU, but of course our time is coming to a close. So though I hate to stop this thought train, we do need to move on. So before we do, though, I would like to give everybody an opportunity to say a little something. Actually, first off, I'd like to thank my wife for coming on with us, because her and her wonderful, what is the word? Intellect when it comes to this sort of thing.
And passion. She brings passion to it.
Most definitely.
And insider information.
So, actually, you've got a channel yourself. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that for the few people watching?
My YouTube channel. Okay, so it's called Kim Create Stuff, but I'm going to change that channel name at some point. But it's my YouTube channel where it's just everything. It's vlogging. It's, you know, creative stuff. It's tech related stuff. Right now, it seems like people want to see a lot of tech videos on Apple products. I'm not rich, so I don't know why. It's like, I can't keep buying Apple products just to keep people coming to my YouTube channel. But
unless they wanted to send them to you, that would
I know, right? Like I posted an unboxing of my new iPad, and that flipping thing got tons of views, and I'm like, okay, all right, fine. I see what y'all want to watch now. So I'm currently editing a what's on my iPad video, and hopefully that'll be up sometime this week. But we shall see. So go there, subscribe, or at least look at my videos. I don't care. Something.
I got to see little tidbits of it, and it looks really good. She's been adjusting the lighting, doing a lot of editing tricks, and she is adapting and learning as she goes. So that's pretty awesome.
You mean color correcting?
She's much better at this than I am, like in spades. So she knows how to do all this stuff. So Dane, tell us just a little bit about yourself here.
Well, sorry if I was dominating in any way, because like as soon as you talk about comic books or superheroes or whatever, then I just go, because has been so much of my life for so long, for longer than there have been comic book superhero cinematic universes. Anyway, yeah, so I'm Dane Kyle, aka Dane Damarung, on YouTube, on the Indie Horror Film Creative YouTube channel, where I've done my series Blu-ray Views, where I've chronicled my process of getting my Blu-ray collection back. It was once quite formidable, and I had to sell so much of it to keep me and my now ex-fiance afloat. With that having passed, I have spent a lot of time and money getting it back, but bigger and better than ever. And I've brought the audience in with me on that journey, and now it's getting back to where it once was, and what it should have always been. And so I brought people on that journey. I'm also a filmmaker, wanting to kind of restart my filmmaking discipline as much as possible, given coronavirus and all that stuff. And then I'm gonna do another series called No Money Film School, where I teach people how to get started with filmmaking, and that kind of stuff. Is just one thing at a time, and also be able to set the foundation for having gotten my collection back, and so now I can build up from there.
Hey Dane, speaking of your ex-fiance, am I allowed to say fuck that bitch?
Sure, why not?
Fuck that bitch.
Yeah,
fuck her. Seriously, fuck that bitch. You don't know what you lost, honey. He's a good kid. Fuck you.
I try. I mean, it's one of those things where I did learn quite a lot of lessons from that relationship. One of which was that you can't sacrifice yourself, for the sake of another person, especially when that other person isn't on the same page as you and isn't willing to do as much for you. And you don't find that out until it's too late. But it's one of those things where I'll never do what I did again, in that way, because like for me, the movie collecting, it's not just a hobby. It's not just something to do, like I'm sure it is for a lot of people. Like I've said it before, I'll say it again. If you want to be a good filmmaker in any way, shape, or form, just like if you want to be a good author, you have to have a big book collection. And if you're not writing, you have to be reading. Same with film. If you're not shooting something or writing a script, you have to be watching film to study it, to get better, get inspiration. That's what I've been doing. I've been getting my collection back because it is a part of you. It's part of your, it's part of your creative bedrock on which you build yourself and your identity. And, so it is far more than just, oh, this is something I can spend my money on. No, it's part of the filmmaker development process. And I think it is as important as, spending your time writing or spending your time getting better at filmmaking. Because if you don't have a wide film repertoire, then, you're not going to make anything that's unique.
Well, one final word, and then we're going to move on that. Just as if you want to see some interesting sets, recent videos include a really interesting Hellraiser set on Dane's channel, by the way, which is a full-on bust of Pinhead. And then you get to see the Shout Factory Halloween set, which I do own. I'm lucky enough to own that one.
It's the
I'm
the
jealous
out
of that
of,
busted
it was
pinhead, by the way. I'm so
well,
jealous
it was
of it.
the
That was nice.
it was the out of print one that Shout Factory did, and then the Hellraiser one. That one was Zavvi exclusive. The Friday the 13th one that I posted today. That one is also out of print. I regretted with every fiber of my being. I regretted having sold or having had to sell those ones that I used to have. Got them back. So I feel really good about that. The Hellraiser one I did not have before, but that one looks great on the shelf. But yeah, I've got so many great videos. It's a indie horror film creative is the channel, and then Blu-ray Views is the series, and you'll see me being able to see the flourishing collection in full bloom and bigger, better than ever. And eventually, once the because now that I've got another full-time job, the collecting will have to the curve will have to slow a little bit, and especially because I had to do so much to jumpstart it. But now the curvature it'll flatten a little bit, and so I'll probably eventually I'll do like a complete Blu-ray collection video, and that way people can stare in awe and envy at the majesty that is the collection now.
Well, speaking of a complete Blu-ray collection, one of these days we want to see Dave's full collection here. But Dave, tell us a little bit about yourself and your channel.
Well, my name is David Strege. I am one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore. But I also moonlight on another channel called Delusions of Grandeur, which maybe for the last 2 weeks I haven't posted anything really, but I will get back into doing what it is that I do, which is posting collection videos, which I have a very nice a nice selection of anime coming eventually in the mail, and some K2 that I wouldn't mind sharing with the world that I have picked up, and so on and so forth. And I know I've got a few reviews that are on my mind to get out. Just have to find a way to just sit down and just blab what I know. So definitely check out some of those things that I'll be eventually posting and getting out once I have time. Today I went on with my Boris, so eventually a talk, a discussion about Crimes at the Dark House from 1940 will be showing up on the channel. So definitely check out that discussion. And yeah, tomorrow night we'll be discussing Dustin's films for the month that we are doing the Meet the Cast moments. I've actually kind of Dustin on the channel, so it'll be nice to have him back on for not one but two discussions on crocodiles and alligators. So,
which remind me, am I on after that with my picks, or is it next or after? Like 2 times after.
Oh, what do you mean?
For
That's
like my picks.
The next one's coming up will be actually it will be Mo's, provided he returns to us. But the next one after that will be Video Violence and Darkness.
Yeah, I thought it was like 2, like Dustin's and then someone else's and then mine.
Yep.
So yeah,
then it'll be yours after that one. Yep.
Okay, because that'll give me time to rewatch them and also try to say new things about them that I haven't said before.
Well, Jake, tell us a little bit about it. I know you got recent editing software put on your computer. At least you were showing you were doing it. So
I did. I haven't gotten a chance to do anything with it yet, but it is there. So yes, I'm Jake. I am the other one on SeptumSin versus the World, and of course also frequently spend time on Inside Movies Galore and Delusions of Grandeur. Last week was my week, and we had a lot of fun, I think. I hope. It got interesting. We had some unusual guests on the Beaver discussion, I suppose. But at any rate, like I said, I do have the editing software on here. Trying to find time to do much of any one particular project can be something, but it is, as you all can probably see, or certainly I feel like the audio visual quality is a lot better than it used to be. So when I do get to make videos, they should be good.
Well, if you were to go with the advice that I got from a director by the name of Evan Jacobs, if you have an opportunity to film, film.
All right.
Don't concentrate on whether it's necessarily a good thing or not. You just do it, and then it may or may not turn out good, and that might be a good philosophy to go by.
It never hurts to experiment, because I mean, trust me, everything that you make will not necessarily be worth its weight in gold, but it'll be an important stepping stone.
So, of course, you're watching SeptumSin versus the World. We are going to be sans Kotobuki Jake for most of the week because, I chose filming time in order to instead cook out on the grill, which after the wonderful meal that I had, I still hold that was probably the better decision. But we will be back to normal next week, and there will be a pickup, and there will be a new release video. We're trying some new things. We're experimenting. So take a look at the channel stuff, these videos upcoming, especially Tuesday's video, because we really are trying to figure out if we can do something more to make this more inclusive, to just make it more fun. We're kind of experimenting with Tier Maker, and what they're doing, because it's really kind of a fun, and to me it's fun. We enjoy that. So with that being said, I really thank you all for coming on and chatting today about superheroes and the Snyder Cut and what it may be. And we will see you guys on the next one. Good night.
Night.
Night.